4:52 in the morning, October 14th, my truck idling in the driveway, exhaust curling into the cold air. The joke had been made the night before, half serious, mostly teasing. "Wanna come along?" Callie hadn't answered. Just smiled and changed the subject. Figured that was that. Then, at dawn, headlights still off, I saw her standing at the end of my driveway. Duffel bag over one shoulder. Travel mug in hand, ready. "You're serious?" I asked. "You offered," she said. "I'm taking it." 6 days on the road with my best friend was about to become something neither of us planned for. My name is Dean, and I've driven long-haul freight for 11 years, the kind of job that keeps you moving through time zones while everyone else's life stays fixed in one place. Callie Reyes moved in next door 4 years ago, back when I was between longer contracts and actually spent enough time at home to notice a new neighbor unpacking boxes without help. Offering to carry a particularly heavy bookshelf up her front steps had seemed like a simple enough gesture. She'd offered me a beer as thanks, and somewhere in that exchange, an ordinary neighborly acquaintance turned into the kind of friendship that survives years without much effort required to maintain it. She worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm downtown, 3 days a week from home, which meant our schedules occasionally overlapped enough for shared dinners or lazy Sunday afternoons on one of our porches, discussing nothing important with the specific ease that develops between people who've simply decided they enjoy each other's company. Over 4 years, Callie became someone I called first with good news, the person who fed my cat during longer hauls, the friend whose opinion mattered more than I probably admitted openly. Dating happened occasionally between longer routes for me, occasionally between design projects for her, and neither of us ever discussed those separate romantic lives in much detail, an unspoken agreement that some topics stayed comfortably outside our friendship's boundaries. Why avoiding that topic felt necessary was something I never let myself examine. Some friendships function precisely because certain foundations go unexamined. 3 months ago, Callie lost her job, not through any fault of her own, just corporate restructuring that eliminated her entire department in one brutal afternoon. She'd handled it with the composed exterior she brought to most difficulties, though subtle changes had appeared in the following weeks. Less energy in her usual conversations, longer stretches between our casual dinners, a kind of quiet retreat that worried me more than she probably realized. It took an unplanned joke on an ordinary Tuesday evening to reveal exactly how much Callie's life had quietly unraveled over those 3 difficult months. October 13th, I stopped by her place before my scheduled Wednesday morning departure, a routine 6-day haul carrying agricultural equipment from Ohio to a distribution center in Montana, the kind of long, monotonous route I'd driven dozens of times without much variation. Callie answered her door looking more tired than I'd seen her in months, her apartment behind her carrying the specific disorder of someone who'd stopped maintaining the careful order she usually preferred. "You look exhausted," I said, settling onto her couch while she poured us both coffee despite the late hour. "Job hunting's exhausting," she said. 40 applications in 3 months, 6 interviews, 0 offers. I'm starting to wonder if I'm actually employable anymore." "That's ridiculous," I said. "You're incredibly talented. This is just a rough market." "Easy for you to say," she said, though her tone carried more exhaustion than genuine bitterness. "Your job doesn't disappear based on corporate restructuring decisions made by people who've never met you." We talked for another hour about her frustrating job search, about the specific rejection emails that had started blurring together into a discouraging blur, about her growing fear that maybe she'd chosen the wrong career entirely despite a decade of successful work in her field. "I need to get out of this apartment," she admitted, near the end of our conversation. "I've been staring at these same 4 walls for 3 months straight, sending applications into a void that never responds." "Wanna come along?" I said, gesturing vaguely toward my truck parked outside. 6 days, Ohio to Montana and back, might be exactly the change of scenery you need. Meant it as a joke, mostly, the kind of casual offer friends make without expecting actual acceptance, acknowledging her frustration without genuinely proposing a serious solution. Callie looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable crossing her expression. "Interesting offer," she said, though she didn't elaborate further, instead changing the subject toward some minor complaint about her upcoming dentist appointment. Leaving shortly after that exchange, I assumed the joke had simply passed without any real consideration on her part. Should have paid closer attention to that particular silence. The evening went to my usual pre-haul preparation, checking my truck's maintenance logs, confirming delivery schedules, packing enough clothes and supplies for 6 days on unpredictable roads. My route would carry me through 1,100 miles one direction, following interstate corridors I'd driven so many times I could probably navigate them unconscious, though October weather's unpredictability always kept genuine complacency at bay. Waking at 4:30 that Wednesday morning, my usual pre-dawn routine felt identical to hundreds of previous departures. Coffee, final equipment checks, loading my truck's cab with the specific supplies that made 6 days of solo driving manageable. Nothing about that routine morning prepared me for what waited at the end of my driveway once I finally pulled my truck out at 4:52. There she stood, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, travel mug already filled with what smelled like strong coffee, wearing the kind of practical clothing that suggested genuine preparation rather than impulsive decision-making. Stopping my truck completely, staring through the windshield in genuine disbelief. "You're serious?" I called out, rolling down my window. "You offered," Callie said, walking toward the passenger side. "I spent all night thinking about it. I'm taking you up on it." "Callie, this is 6 days, sleeping in truck stops, eating gas station food, hours of empty highway with nothing to look at except grain silos." "Sounds perfect," she said, already climbing into the passenger seat with the confidence of someone who'd made this decision thoroughly rather than impulsively. "Exactly the kind of disruption I need right now." Sitting there for a moment, processing the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Are you sure about this? This isn't some romantic road trip. This is genuinely difficult, monotonous work." "I know exactly what I'm signing up for," Callie said. "I researched long-haul trucking extensively last night, while I was supposedly sleeping. I know about the dot-hour regulations, the way stations, the specific challenges of driving through mountain passes in October weather." "You researched trucking regulations at midnight?" "I told you I spent all night thinking about it," she said, buckling her seatbelt with the finality of someone who'd already committed completely. "Okay," I said finally, putting my truck into gear. 6 days it is." We pulled out of my driveway together, morning light just beginning to break across the eastern horizon, both of us moving toward something neither of us had quite named yet. The first several hours passed in comfortable, familiar conversation, Callie asking genuine questions about my job's specific mechanics, apparently fascinated by details most passengers never bothered inquiring about. "How do you actually plan a route like this?" she asked, studying the GPS display mounted near my dashboard. "Beyond just following the highway signs, fuel stops matter enormously," I explained. "You're planning around specific truck stops that can actually accommodate a rig this size, calculating exact mileage between them, accounting for mandatory rest periods the DOT requires. How many miles until your first mandatory break?" "Regulations require a 30-minute break after 8 hours of driving," I said. "We're looking at roughly 450 miles before that first stop, assuming normal traffic conditions." Callie nodded, apparently filing away this information with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. By early afternoon, we'd settled into an easy rhythm, conversation flowing between comfortable silence and genuine discussion about everything from her frustrated job search to my own layered relationship with a career that kept me constantly moving while everyone else's life remained fixed. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Callie asked, somewhere around our 300-mile of that first day. "Sometimes," I said, considering the question honestly, though I've built enough routine into these hauls that loneliness doesn't usually overwhelm the actual satisfaction of the work. "What satisfaction specifically?" "There's something actually peaceful about watching landscape change slowly through your windshield," I said. "No emails demanding immediate response, no meetings, no corporate restructuring threatening your livelihood without warning." Landing with unexpected weight, that last comment made Callie's expression shift slightly. "I envy that peace," Callie admitted. "These past 3 months, I've felt like my entire identity was tied to a career that disappeared overnight through decisions made by people who never even knew my name." "That sounds genuinely destabilizing," I said. "It is," she said. "I've started questioning things I thought were settled. Whether I chose the right career, whether the past decade of work actually meant anything if it could disappear that easily, whether I'm building toward anything permanent at all." We drove through the remainder of that first day discussing increasingly personal territory, Callie revealing frustrations and fears she'd apparently been carrying privately during those difficult 3 months of unemployment. By evening, we'd reached our first planned stop, a truck stop outside Indianapolis with the combination of fluorescent lighting and diesel fumes that characterizes most such establishments. "This is genuinely not glamorous," I warned as we settled into the truck stop's attached diner for dinner. "I didn't expect glamorous," Callie said, studying a menu that offered mostly fried options. "I expected exactly this." Which is somehow exactly what I needed. What Callie said next revealed something significant about why this seemingly impulsive trip had actually mattered enormously to her, a revelation that would deepen considerably over the following days as our conversations grew increasingly honest. "Can I tell you something?" Callie said midway through her dinner. "The real reason I said yes to this trip? Please. I've been having panic attacks," she admitted, "since losing my job. Nothing dramatic. Just this overwhelming sense of dread that arrives without warning, usually while I'm sitting alone in my apartment, staring at rejection emails." That admission carried weight I hadn't anticipated, revealing depth to her struggle beyond simple professional frustration. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "I didn't want to burden you," she said. "You've got your own demanding job. I didn't want to add emotional labor on top of everything else." "Callie, that's exactly the kind of thing friends are supposed to share." "I know that logically," she said, "but something about admitting vulnerability that directly felt too exposed, even with you." We finished dinner in thoughtful silence, both processing the significance of what she'd just revealed, before returning to my truck for the sleeper cab's cramped but functional accommodations. "This is smaller than I expected," Callie observed, examining the compact sleeping quarters behind my truck's main cab. "Long-haul trucking isn't designed for comfort," I said, "just functionality." We settled into our respective sleeping arrangements, Callie taking the small bunk while I reclined the driver's seat as far as comfortably possible. An unexpectedly emotional first day had passed out of what was supposed to be simple, monotonous highway driving, sleeping just feet apart in my truck's cramped cab. That created an intimacy neither of us had experienced during 4 years of comfortable, appropriately distant friendship. Day 2 brought us through Illinois and into Iowa, the landscape gradually shifting from urban sprawl into increasingly rural farmland, endless fields stretching toward horizons broken only occasionally by grain elevators and small-town water towers. "How many total miles is this route?" Callie asked, somewhere around lunch that second day. 1,123 miles one direction," I said. "We're currently at mile 387, assuming my odometer's accurate." "You track it that precisely?" "Precision matters in this job," I said. "Fuel calculations, delivery timing, mandatory rest requirements, everything depends on accurate mileage tracking." Personal conversation deepened that second day, both of us gradually revealing details about our lives that 4 years of comfortable friendship had somehow never fully explored. "Why haven't you settled down?" Callie asked, somewhere during a particularly long, empty stretch of Iowa highway. "You're what, 36? Most people your age have figured out some permanent life structure." That question landed with more weight than its casual delivery suggested. "Permanence feels risky," I said, more honestly than I'd planned. "This job gives me constant movement, constant change of scenery. I think I've used it as a reason not to build anything that could eventually fail." "Has anyone ever made you consider changing that pattern?" Callie asked, her tone carrying something I couldn't immediately identify. Glancing over at her, genuinely uncertain how to answer honestly. "I'm still figuring that out," I said finally. We drove through the remainder of that second day in contemplative silence, both of us processing conversations that had revealed considerably more than our comfortable 4-year friendship had previously required. Day 3 brought us through Nebraska, the landscape growing increasingly flat and monotonous, hundreds of miles of identical highway stretching toward a horizon that never seemed to change regardless of how many miles accumulated on my odometer. Weather reports that morning indicated an approaching storm system, the kind of unpredictable October weather that occasionally complicated even carefully planned routes. "Should we be worried?" Callie asked, studying the darkening sky ahead of us. "We'll monitor it," I said. "Sometimes these systems pass quickly, sometimes they require pulling over entirely until conditions improve." By mid-afternoon, the storm had intensified beyond simple rain into something considerably more dangerous, wind gusts strong enough to make my heavily loaded truck genuinely difficult to control, despite years of experience handling challenging weather conditions. "We need to pull over," I said, spotting a truck stop exit approximately 2 miles ahead. "This is getting too dangerous to continue safely." Pulling over extended our journey by several hours, and what the enforced downtime revealed would reshape everything I thought I understood about our friendship's history. We waited out the storm at a truck stop outside Kearney, Nebraska, the establishment's small attached motel offering temporary refuge, while weather conditions remained too dangerous for continued driving. This wasn't in the original itinerary, Callie observed, watching rain hammer against the motel room's window. Weather delays happen regularly in this job, I said. You learn to build flexibility into every schedule. We settled into the small motel room, conversation gradually shifting toward increasingly personal territory as the enforced downtime removed our usual distraction of highway monotony. Can I ask you something? Callie said, sitting cross-legged on one of the room's two beds. Why did you actually make that joke about me coming along? Some part of me genuinely wanted you here, I admitted. Beyond just offering a distraction from your job search, I've enjoyed this trip more than any solo haul I can remember. Callie's expression shifted slightly at that admission. I need to use the bathroom, she said suddenly, standing and retrieving her duffel bag from where she'd set it near the door. Her duffel bag, apparently zipped incompletely during her rushed exit, tipped slightly as she moved it, spilling a small notebook onto the motel room's carpet. Picking it up automatically, intending simply to set it back with her other belongings, but the notebook had fallen open to a specific page, and the date at the top stopped me, nearly 2 years earlier. I shouldn't have read it, knew that immediately. But something about that date held me. March 3rd. Dean helped me move that bookshelf again today, the ridiculous one I never should have bought. He made a joke about my terrible furniture choices, and I laughed harder than the joke actually deserved, mostly because watching him laugh at his own joke does something to my chest I'm not ready to examine directly. Flipping forward several pages, finding another entry from approximately 8 months earlier. November 15th. Dean brought soup when I had the flu, sat with me for 3 hours watching terrible reality television, never once making me feel embarrassed about how genuinely awful I looked. I think I've been in love with him for longer than I'm comfortable admitting, possibly since that first bookshelf conversation. Setting the notebook down slowly. 2 years of feelings, carried silently through every comfortable Sunday afternoon, every shared dinner, every moment I'd been careful not to examine too closely. The bathroom door opened. Callie emerged, immediately noticing my expression. What's wrong? Your notebook fell out of your bag, I said, deciding honesty was the only reasonable path forward. It fell open. I saw some entries before I could stop myself. Callie's face went completely pale. How much did you read? Enough to understand you've had feelings for me for nearly 2 years, I admitted. Since apparently a conversation about a bookshelf. She stood frozen near the bathroom doorway, clearly processing the magnitude of this unplanned revelation. I'm so sorry, I said. I should have closed it immediately instead of reading further. It's fine, Callie said, though her voice carried obvious distress. I mean, it's not fine, but you didn't do anything malicious. It just wasn't how I planned for you to find out, if I ever planned to tell you at all. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. Callie sat down heavily on the room's second bed. Because the risk felt enormous. You're not just someone I dated casually and could easily lose. You're my closest friend. If I told you and you didn't feel the same way, I wouldn't just lose a potential relationship. I'd lose the most important friendship in my current life. I understand that fear, I said. Honestly, I think I've been protecting myself similarly, avoiding examining certain feelings too closely because losing you as a friend felt too significant to risk. What feelings, specifically? Callie asked, her voice carrying careful hope. Something developing beyond simple friendship, I said. I don't know exactly when it started, but this trip has made those feelings considerably harder to ignore. Callie stared at me, processing this reciprocal admission. You're serious? Completely serious, I said. The storm outside continued for another 2 hours. Neither of us pushed to define what we just admitted. The rain against the window said enough. At some point, Callie laughed. Not at anything specific, just the strange relief of it all. And I laughed too, and something that had been tightly coiled between us for 4 years finally loosened. We ordered terrible vending machine food and ate it on our respective beds and talked until the rain stopped. Not about the feelings themselves, but around them. The way you circle something that's finally safe to stand near. Morning brought cleared roads and a changed dynamic, one we'd carry through Wyoming's dramatic mountain terrain without yet knowing how to fully name it. We resumed driving early the next day, Day 4 of our journey. Conversation carrying a new, careful awareness across mile after mile of increasingly dramatic landscape. This feels different, Callie observed. Somewhere around mile 600, watching Wyoming's mountain ranges begin appearing on the horizon ahead of us. Good different, or complicated different? I asked. Both, probably, she said. I've spent 2 years carefully guarding these feelings and suddenly they're just openly acknowledged. I don't quite know how to act now. Neither do I, honestly, I admitted. Think we just continue being ourselves, but maybe with slightly less pretending about certain things. Navigating a particularly steep mountain pass required my complete concentration, conversation naturally pausing while I focused on safely managing my heavily loaded truck through challenging terrain. Once we'd cleared the most difficult section, Callie spoke again. Can I ask you something? About the bookshelf conversation specifically? Of course. Do you remember it? Genuinely, not just as some vague first meeting, but the actual specifics. Searching memory more carefully than the question initially seemed to require, I remember more than I probably should, I admitted. You were wearing this ridiculous paint-stained shirt, clearly exhausted from unpacking, and you made some self-deprecating joke about buying furniture that exceeded your actual moving competence. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then Callie laughed, surprised. That's remarkably accurate. Think I've held on to more specific memories of our friendship than I've previously acknowledged, I said. Maybe because some part of me recognized their significance, even while telling myself this was simply ordinary friendship. That admission opened increasingly honest conversation as we continued through Wyoming's dramatic landscape, both of us gradually excavating years of carefully unexamined feelings that had apparently existed alongside our comfortable friendship the entire time. By evening, we'd reached our planned overnight stop outside Cheyenne, settling into another modest motel room while processing an entire day's worth of increasingly significant conversation. Keep thinking about something, Callie said during dinner at a small diner attached to our motel. If I hadn't lost my job 3 months ago, if that specific crisis hadn't happened, would either of us have ever said anything about these feelings? Probably not, I admitted honestly. We'd built such a comfortable equilibrium around our friendship that examining anything beyond it felt genuinely risky. That's a somewhat depressing thought, Callie said. 2 years of feelings potentially never surfacing. Maybe not depressing, I said. Maybe evidence that sometimes we need circumstances significant enough to force genuine honesty we're otherwise too comfortable avoiding. That's a generous interpretation, Callie said, though her expression suggested she appreciated the framing. We finished dinner in comfortable, if still somewhat charged, conversation, gradually settling into a new dynamic that acknowledged our mutual feelings without yet fully defining what those feelings meant for our practical future. Day 5 brought us through Wyoming's remaining mountain terrain and into Montana, our final destination approaching as the landscape gradually shifted from dramatic peaks into increasingly rural farmland. We're almost there, I observed, checking my GPS display. Roughly 90 miles remaining before our delivery point. Arriving at our destination meant confronting exactly what came next for whatever had developed between us during this unplanned journey. What happens once we deliver this load? Callie asked. Do we just drive back to Ohio and pretend none of this happened? Don't want to pretend anything, I said. But I also don't know exactly what comes next practically, given that you're still processing unemployment and I'm still committed to this constant movement career. Those complications don't erase what we've discovered about each other this week, Callie said. No, I agreed, but they do require honest conversation about what a genuine relationship between us would actually require. We arrived at our Montana delivery point that afternoon, completing the straightforward logistics of unloading our agricultural equipment cargo while continuing to process the significant emotional territory we'd covered during the preceding 5 days. Need to tell you something, Callie said, once we'd completed the delivery and settled back into my truck's cab. Something I haven't fully admitted yet, even to myself. What is it? I asked, genuinely curious given how much honesty we'd already navigated during this unexpected journey. Part of why I said yes to this trip, beyond just needing distraction from my job search, was hoping something exactly like this might happen, Callie admitted. Some part of me has been waiting for an opportunity to finally address these feelings, even if I couldn't consciously acknowledge that motivation beforehand. That makes sense, actually, I said, given how quickly you decided to come along, despite genuinely limited preparation time. I researched trucking regulations at midnight, Callie said, laughing slightly. That should have been my first clue. We spent that evening in Montana discussing practical logistics for whatever relationship we were building, how her ongoing job search might factor into potential future travel arrangements, how my demanding schedule of long hauls would require genuine flexibility and understanding from any partner. I don't want you to feel obligated to accommodate my career, I said. This lifestyle isn't for everyone. Extended absences, unpredictable schedules, genuine physical demands that most relationships don't require navigating. I've spent 6 days learning exactly what this lifestyle requires, Callie said. I don't think I'm romanticizing it unrealistically. I think I'm actually drawn to both the lifestyle and the person living it. Our return journey began the following morning, day 6 of our original itinerary, the relationship's newly acknowledged foundation making this leg of the trip carry entirely different emotional weight. Partway through Wyoming, Callie's phone rang, and the call would introduce the first genuine complication to what we'd just built. Callie's expression shifted to visible surprise upon checking the caller ID. "It's a recruiter," she said, answering quickly. "From that design firm I interviewed with 3 weeks ago." Listening to her side of the conversation, processing that this call might significantly complicate whatever future we were tentatively building together. "They're offering me the position," Callie said, once she'd ended the call, her expression carrying complicated emotion. "Starting in 2 weeks. It's in Colorado, though, not Ohio." "That's an incredible opportunity," I said, genuinely meaning it despite the complicated implications for us specifically. "It is," Callie agreed, "but I don't know how to process taking it, given everything we've just discovered about each other." "You should take it," I said after a careful moment. Callie looked at me steadily. "Are you saying that because you mean it, or because you think that's what you're supposed to say?" "Fair question. Both, if I'm honest," I said. "I mean it because you've spent 3 months in freefall and this is solid ground. And I also think I'm supposed to say it because the alternative is me asking you to pass up a career you've been rebuilding for, what, a week of road trip feelings?" "Not just a week," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "Not just a week." Silence passed between us, the kind that wasn't empty. "I drive freight routes throughout the entire western United States," I said finally. "Colorado isn't outside my normal delivery range. We could figure out how to make this work, if you're willing to consider a relationship that requires creative logistics." "Are you serious about that?" Callie asked. "About making this work despite the distance?" "I've never been more serious about anything," I said. "This entire unplanned trip has taught me that I don't want to keep avoiding permanence just because it's initially uncomfortable." By evening, Callie had made her decision. "I'm accepting the position," she said. "Not just for the career opportunity, but because I think building something real with you requires me actually stepping into uncertainty rather than just talking about wanting genuine change." Our final day of return travel brought us back through Nebraska and Iowa, retracing the same route that had carried us toward Montana 6 days earlier, though everything about our dynamic had transformed considerably since that initial departure. "Keep thinking about your original joke," Callie said, somewhere around our familiar stretch of empty Iowa highway. "Want to come along?" Neither of us understood yet how much weight those 3 words would eventually carry. "Definitely didn't intend anything this significant when I said it," I admitted. "Just an offhand comment offering distraction." "Sometimes the most significant moments arrive disguised as something casual," Callie said. Arriving back in Ohio late that final evening, pulling into my familiar driveway nearly identical to how we'd departed 6 days earlier, though everything about our relationship had fundamentally transformed during that intervening week. "This feels strange," Callie observed as we sat together in my parked truck, neither of us quite ready to end this unexpected journey. Ending exactly where we started, but as completely different people than who left here 6 days ago. "Not completely different," I said, "just more honest about who we'd actually become over these past 4 years of friendship." Callie moved to Colorado 3 weeks later. I adjusted my regular routes to include her city monthly. A year after that first October haul, I pulled into the parking lot of that same Nebraska truck stop, same rain, Callie in the passenger seat again, and proposed before the engine stopped running. She said yes before I finished the question. Sometimes a joke reveals more truth than either person intends. If this moved you, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and subscribe. Because have you ever made a half-serious offer and had someone take you up on it at exactly the right moment?